On today's Question of Faith, what if you don't get anything out of Mass? Hey everybody, this is Question of Faith. I am Mike Hayes. I'm the Director of Young Adult Ministry in the Diocese of Cleveland.
And I'm Father Damien Ferentz, the Vicar for Evangelization.
And I am Emily Ahlin, Director of Archives for the Diocese of Cleveland.
Emily's back. Yay.
Emily's back. She warned us that she has not COVID, but she has a little bit of a cough, so if she coughs, just forgive her, because that's what we plan to do too. Not shame her, but forgive her.
I'm hiding behind the computer screen and using that as a shield here, just in case.
At this point, it can't be contagious, because I've been sick for weeks now. It's just lingering at this point. So
you were kind of sick on our retreat, weren't you? If I remember right, a little bit.
Yeah, it may or may not have been because we went camping the weekend before, and it was below freezing overnight.
Yeah, that would do
it. That'll take care of that.
Thanks for your hard work on our retreat, by the way.
My pleasure. It was a good time.
It was a good time, yeah.
If you missed it, you should come on the next one, whenever the next one is.
Yeah.
Is there one going to be in spring or no? You
know we're having a meeting about that.
Okay.
But I think so. Probably in the February month is what we're thinking.
Cool. That's not spring. That's winter. Good time to retreat, though.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, speaking of good times, well, what if I don't get anything out of Mass? Someone said. What do we respond when people say that to us, or have we ever said it? Is the next question.
It's a common question or a common pronouncement that I don't get anything out of Mass. That's why I don't go. What are your thoughts, Emily?
You know, my gut reaction to this question was, me too, join the club. And I say that for two reasons. Obviously, I went for the shock factor here, right? Because, you're asking me this question and you're not expecting me to say, yeah, I don't get anything either. But I think it's important from a vulnerability standpoint, for us to admit that, sometimes we go to Mass and we don't get anything out of it either. And, it happens, especially, I go to Mass on an almost daily basis. There's some days where I'm just not, completely mentally prepared to, listen to the gospel or, listen to a homily, or there's, all kinds of other factors in the way. And I think, kind of, being vulnerable and letting people know, hey, I struggle with this too, but this was something that worked for me, goes a long way.
Yeah. It's like anything else, right? I mean, work isn't a rip-roaring good time every single day that you go to work. Marriage isn't a rip-roaring good time every single day that you're married, I mean, your priesthood probably is, has its moments, right?
Grass is brown on both sides.
Right, yeah,
there's always, wherever you are, there's going to be suffering and hard times, and joys.
Yeah. I thought I would go this way with this is slightly snotty, and so, well, what are you putting into it was going to be my next question. Have you come to Mass willing to give yourself, fully to what's going on? A couple times when I've said that, people have mistranslated that answer and thought that I meant, what are you putting in the collection?
Oh.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I watch it. I say, no, I usually preface it and say, I'm not talking about the amount of money you put in the collection here. I said, what I'm talking about is what are you giving of yourself when you're at Mass. I said, because this is not just about what's, it's about all of us. It's not just about one person or about 10 people or, the lectors, the Eucharistic ministers, the choir, et cetera, et cetera. It's about all of us.
Yeah. I did something similar, and that was following our Lord's lead. You answer a question with a question. So I don't get anything out of Mass. What do I do if I don't get anything out of Mass? I think my question is, what were you expecting? So what did you want? What was the desire you had when you went? And then maybe we can get somewhere. Because I do think that some of our brothers and sisters in other Christian denominations who don't celebrate liturgy but go to church and worship is much more of a spectator sport. So you can, at some places, you could bring your coffee in, and sometimes it's stadium seating, and that you have a band that's very entertaining, a preacher who's very engaging. So the job of the congregant is to sit back and take something away, like you would going to a basketball game or a concert, where liturgy is work, and it's God's work in his people, but it's the work of God's people too. So coming in, and as Emily said, if we're not ready to receive what's given, then oftentimes we don't, even though the word of the Lord is proclaimed at every Mass and his word is living and effective, and he comes to us in the sacrament of the Eucharist, body, blood, soul, divinity. So a lot of it is preparation and knowing what it is that is there to receive and what that looks like. And it may not be an emotional get. It may be a deeply spiritual reception that maybe you don't feel much of it. But the fact that you were there, something did happen. And it's not instantaneous the way that so many of our other things in life are.
Yeah, when I said that for two reasons. That was going to be the second reason, was I think a lot of times people expect to get like this emotional high every time you go to Mass. And it's just, that doesn't happen all the time. I mean, you figure Mother Teresa was in spiritual darkness for 40 years. She didn't get anything, like, you know, quote unquote, didn't get anything out of Mass, like didn't get a spiritual high from that, not from prayer, didn't feel the presence of the Lord. And yet she was able to enter in more deeply and grow closer to the Lord through that time. And so I think for a lot of what has helped me is kind of understanding what is happening during the Mass so that I know how to offer my prayers at that particular moment, or like what the symbolism of all of this is. And that helps me on the days when Mass just like does nothing for me emotionally, which happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I find it easier to enter in when I'm when I have a role, right? And that's true for me in anything when I think about it. You know, like I always say, like things like Theology on Tap, I tell Coral Pais, who helps us run that, so give me a job to do. Because I'm not necessarily good at just walking up to people and saying, hey, how are you? I'm Mike Hayes, you know, all those kinds of stuff. But if I have a job, you know, if I have to take tickets or if I have to, you know, go work with someone on something or move some tables with somebody or whatever, that's something I can do, and it helps me interact. It's very male, right, Father?
Yeah, guys define themselves by what they do.
Yeah,
I think that's true.
Yeah.
Well, I think, too, you know, when the Second Vatican Council called us to full conscious active participation, the idea is that everybody who's at Mass has something to do, and that is being attentive to the prayers. Like at the beginning of Mass, before the collect is prayed, there's supposed to be time of silence where we're locking in and uniting our prayers with the prayers of the priest who's leading that collect prayer. Or during the readings, I know there's debates on whether we should have the hymnals there so you could read or you should just listen, but some people are visual learners, so I think whatever works for you.
I'm that way, yeah. But, sensing rather than being intuitive about it.
Yeah, but locking into the readings, paying attention during the homily, even the petitions, it's a lot of work. And at the end of Mass, we ought to be a little bit tired if we did it right. I know, 2 or 3 Masses a weekend for me. I'm pretty tired at the end of the week on the presider's side of things. But and even entering into the silence, that's being fully consciously, actively participating, after the homily or maybe after receiving communion and just entering in and allowing the Lord to enter into you, that takes work.
Yeah. And I think, too, like, there's a piece here, and I think I said this last week, there's a critical piece here, too, right? Like, sometimes liturgy just isn't performed well, for lack of a better term, Well, do you say anything about that? And what's your responsibility in trying to make that better? I can't think of his first name right now. Patrick Lencioni has written a number of books about these things. He talks about being in his church saying, there was this little old lady banging on the piano keyboards that was just driving everybody away. He was like, Father, you got to do something about this. He goes, and you have to teach us how to pray. Most of us don't know how to pray. He goes, could you do that? And it changed the parish. I mean, he was like, look, I have a big mouth. That's the bottom line, He said, but I felt it affecting people.
I think during this Eucharistic revival, and this because you're on the Eucharistic revival team, one of the things we're hoping is that Bishop Woost, who is a auxiliary bishop but also a liturgist and has taught liturgy for 22 years, could, during the parish phase, be going out to parishes and be doing 3-night revivals explaining the Mass. Maybe the first night on the introductory rites and the Liturgy of the Word, the second night on the Liturgy of the Eucharist and the concluding rites, and then on the third night, celebrate Mass with great music and with great welcoming, and even a daily mass is fine. But show what it could be after some catechesis and evangelization and formation. I think that would be helpful, because I think there's a lot of people who don't know what they're supposed to be doing, or what they expect. Like, I wanted more than I got, but I don't even know what to ask for or desire here.
The game changer for me when it came to praying the Mass was... it was before COVID. I was still living in Pittsburgh back in 2018. The young adult group at the cathedral in Pittsburgh did, like, I think it was every other week. We would come together and we would watch Bishop Barron's series on the Mass. And if you have access to that, that was the game changer for me. It changed the way I prayed the Mass. I learned so many new things from watching this video series of Bishop Barron explaining, like, okay, this is what the liturgy of the word is. And, like, when you offer up the gifts, that's the part where you're supposed to offer up your prayers to the Lord. And this is why this is important and why you don't want to leave this out. And it really did just transform the way I prayed the Mass.
When I was 17 years old, going into my senior year of high school, one of my good buddies was a classmate. I played baseball with him. He started entering into dialogue with his older brother, who was part of something called Campus Crusade for Christ up at Bowling Green State University. It's a non-denominational campus ministry. And my buddy really started getting into his own faith, reading the Bible, having a personal relationship with the Lord. And he was raised Catholic, but for some reason that never clicked with him. And we started entering into dialogue, and I was interested in the things he was saying. He was also asking me about why I believe what I believe about the Pope, the sacraments, Mary, the Eucharist
Saints,
in particular, saints, all these things. So I started doing some research on my own, and I asked my high school chaplain, Father Krisner, I said, hey, Father, could I go to his church just to check it out? He goes, no, you're not ready for that yet. I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do? And he gave me a series of cassette tapes by Scott Hahn, and it was on the Eucharist and the Passover. And although I had Catholic education my whole life, the Catholic education in the 80s was heavy on the heart, but not as much on the head. And this was the first time in my life that it was explained to me the whole Passover, and then Jesus was the Passover lamb and the blood of the new covenant. And I remember being in my basement on Thornton Drive in Parma, Ohio, listening to these cassettes on my stereo that I listened to Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and Smashing Pumpkins on. And I took out a notebook and was taking notes because something was hitting me intellectually, and I was starting to understand the Mass and the Eucharist in a way that I never had before. So like you, it was barren, but here it was these Scott Hahn cassette tapes on the fourth cup. And he was a former Protestant and came to understand the Eucharist through his study of the Bible and going to Mass. So that changed it for me. Now, that was 17 years old. I'm 46 now. And reading helps me a lot, even video sometimes too. But continuing formation, because you never solve the mystery of the Eucharist or what's going on there. There's always like a new angle to get in on it.
Yeah. The book that we're reading in class right now, or one of the books that we're reading in class, is, by the way, the Emily cough count is up to 4. If you've got 8 in the pool, you're doing okay. Stand by. See, now I'm making her laugh, which will make her cough more. But one of the books that we're reading for class right now is Kevin Irwin's 101 Questions About the Mass, which I find really good, and I've learned a whole bunch of things in there.
CUA guy.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah, and we used to have him on at Busted Halo on the show all the time on the radio show, but because he taught Father Dwyer at CUA.
Oh, okay.
But I think for me, there's that, like, asking, like, the few unknown questions that are going on. Like, one of the things I learned this past week this is from, I think, Bill Deitwig's book, actually, The Deacon at Mass. The general instructions, the prayer of the faithful, they're not supposed to be for a specific cause. They're general instructions. And Deacon Bill goes, a little bit further, and he says, even to the point of this Mass is offered for. He said, you shouldn't do that during the prayer of the faithful. And I was like, wow, I don't know any parish that doesn't do that, except mine.
You can get away with it if you say, for the repose of the soul of Joe Smith and all the faithful departed.
Yes, right, yeah, exactly. But it was funny. The next week, I went to Mass at St. Brendan's, where I'm doing Feel Dead, and they started Mass by saying, please keep in prayer this person who died, who asked us to keep them in prayer at this Mass. And they didn't say it during the prayer of the faithful. And I was like, oh. I was like, let's see what happens when you pay attention.
And when the pastor's older brother is your auxiliary bishop, who's also a liturgist.
That's right, exactly.
That'll whip you into shape.
Yeah. But I think for me, I had two really good deacons in my parish growing up who taught me a lot, and as an altar server, they really wanted to make sure the altar servers knew what they were doing. Mm-hmm. And so he walked all of us through this, and that was really a great formation for me. And so, when I became the director of campus ministry, we didn't have a liturgist necessarily on the staff, right? And things were really wonky. Like I noticed the first week, even when I was interviewing, they took me to Mass, I was like, oh, Mass is a little wonky. I don't know what's going on. And the staff was really grateful that I had that kind of knowledge, because they were like, yeah, we just don't know, Mike. Mm-hmm. We just don't know how to do this. I was like, it's Mass. We've done it 35,000 times. And yes, you've done it 35,000 times and paid attention. Mm-hmm. We haven't. We just kind of go through we just kind of go through it, not even go through the motions. We're looking at it differently, I think is what someone said. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if that's true for most people, is what I thought.
When I trained servers on my first assignment in St. Mary's in Hudson, I'd give them an exam. It was a 50-question exam,
we did that too.
And they had to pass it. But the idea was that if you want to serve, you've got to put something into this, and you have to know something, and that makes it more special for the servers. Like, wow, I'm part of something here. Yeah. It's funny. The biggest takeaway in our diocese from the Synod on Synodality was a desire for more adult faith formation, and what we're talking about here is that, okay, we go to Mass, but I want to know more about it. I want to understand it more. I want to better appreciate what it is that I'm doing when I come to Mass on Sunday.
Yeah. And I think the three of us are all very intellectually driven, like that. I had and where I'm getting with this is I had someone ask me once. They were like, "Which of the transcendentals, are you most attracted to?" And I looked at that person and I was like, "What are you talking about?"
Truth, beauty, or goodness?
Truth, beauty, and goodness. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly, Father. And so they explained that to me, and I was like, oh, and I was like, you know what? I don't actually know. I've never put much thought into this. And so I discovered a couple weeks later, after listening to some very intellectual talks that made everybody else fall asleep, and I was like, this is awesome, give me more. That it was truth. That truth is what kind of draws me in. But for other people, it's beauty, and other people, it's goodness. Yeah. And so, if you yourself find yourself listening to this, and you're like, wow, they're talking about all kinds of very intellectual things, and that's how I have to learn more about the Mass, you can be drawn more into Mass by the beauty and the goodness of it too, because those are all ways that we encounter God.
I do a lot of my evangelization through beauty, because I do think that's probably the most attractive and the most disarming for most folks. You know what I mean? You're like, this is the truth. You come out. But for me, I do like when things make sense and I could follow arguments and, oh my gosh, that you just put something together for me that I hadn't put together for myself, or I felt, but I didn't understand why I liked it. That goes a long way with me.
Yeah. And I think it's funny that we're all saying this. You just said truth. You just said beauty. I'll say goodness, which is the one that did attract me the most. But for me, it's when people are so moved by the beauty at Mass that proclaims the truth of our tradition, are they propelled to go forth from this place to do good, to have goodness?
And come back to Mother Teresa with a woman who had experienced dryness in her prayer, but the fruit of her prayer was the goodness that she brought to the world. So. Yeah. Did you just count number 5?
That's 6.
Oh, 6.
We're up to 6 now.
Well, we've only got a couple more minutes.
We'll see.
But what's the over-under? Is it 8?
8, I think, is the over-under. Yeah, that's fine. I'll take the over.
Okay. I'll take the under. Take that loss.
Got to protect your bet there. But yeah, no, I think that was good, Emily. I think that using the transcendentals to think about this is probably a good way to go. And then we often find our place at Mass in a church. Almost always,
Almost
right?
always, unless you're on retreat somewhere.
Yeah, unless you're on retreat
or
or
on vacation.
Yeah, right.
Outdoor mass somewhere.
Outdoor Mass,
every
that's
now
what I
and
was
again.
thinking. Yeah, Central Park with Pope John Paul II. I remember that well. Or Poland with Pope Francis. Emily's getting ready to go to
So
World
jealous.
Youth Day.
I
Yeah.
am.
I do
am
hotel.
getting-
Oh, sorry.
I am. Yeah, I'm really excited. Middle school Emily watched World Youth Day in Spain on EWTN with her grandparents in their living room and thought to herself, I'm never going to get to go to World Youth Day. So, no.
Are you speaking
Middle school
of yourself
Emily-
in third person now?
I am
Middle
speaking
school
of
me?
myself in the third person. So, middle school Emily, you made it.
Yeah, there you go.
You're going to Portugal.
Heading to Portugal. So, by the way, if you want to go to World Youth Day, you can check out our World Youth Day section on the website, and you can send me an email. I can send you some more information. We're going to go with Franciscan Spirit Tours. We're also going to be walking the Portuguese Camino before World Youth Day. So we'll walk the Portuguese Camino, which is about 100 kilometers, and then we'll head over to be with the Holy Father right after that.
I can't think of an experience that gives you a better sense of the universality
Yeah.
of the Catholic Church than World Youth Day.
Yeah. I remember being in Toronto and looking around and saying, wow, it's a beautiful summer day. There are all these young people from all these different countries who are from all different kinds of cultures and everything else. I said, and they're here because they're Catholic and they're here because the Holy Father's here. And I was like, wow, this is a good idea.
Yeah.
You know? It's
Yeah.
like, it was my first thought. But an interesting church search this week. So Catholic Creatives,
Yes.
a group of folks, a group of artists, basically. who,
Beauty.
Beauty, there you go, who are here in the diocese. We've asked them to think about the Eucharistic revival, so they invited me to one of their meetings. I said, so where are you meeting on this date that we're meeting? And they said, oh yeah, it'll be over at St. Anne's. Now, ordinarily I would make the translation that the church known as St. Anne's is now, it's a parish that's Communion of Saints. So you
Right.
can talk about the difference between that in a second. But most people, I didn't make the translation. I was like, where the heck is St. Anne's? I thought I knew all these churches at this point. I've been here for 2 years, and I'm like, oh, now I know.
Yeah, St. Anne's is the church in Cleveland Heights. Seven? In Cleveland Heights on the corner of Coventry and Cedar Road. You can't miss it. It's big. It's beautiful. And it's got a very high tower. And if you ever get a chance to climb up there, you get a panoramic view of the city. And if you go inside, you may say, gee, this feels like an old bank. And the reason it feels like an old bank is because it's composed of parts of an old bank.
Huh.
So during the Depression, one of the banks closed in New York City, and Monsignor Powers, the former pastor, gathered up some of the goods, had them brought out to Cleveland on a train, and then built this church. And we could do a whole show on Monsignor Powers and St. Anne Church. So St. Anne Church is still St. Anne Church, although it's part of the parish is now Communion of Saints, because there was a St. Louis in there. There were a couple other saints that all had saint names. And Bishop Lennon's idea was, well, we'll just call it Communion of Saints, because all these saint parishes came together to form a new parish called Communion of Saints. But because the church was dedicated St. Anne's, it remains St. Anne's. And Deacon Dom Gideon, a former student of mine, who, God willing, will be ordained a priest this year, is very active in Catholic Creatives and went to St. Anne's grade school. So he's a little stubborn and still calls it St. Anne's. That's the story.
He's not the only one. There are a bunch of people who are like,
okay.
it's St. Anne's.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
There's another cool thing about St. Anne's. Whoa, I just coughed once
one.
too. Look what Emily did to me.
Uh-oh.
So from the street, the church the school looks like it has 2 floors,
Yes.
but it actually has 3, and it's an architectural trick to beat the city code, which was a Monsignor Powers thing to do. Yeah, we'll do a whole show on that church sometime.
Cool.
It's fun.
All right. So that's Communion of Saints Parish and St. Anne's Church for Church. We'll put that in the show notes. And our gospel this week, Zacchaeus.
Oh,
is
yeah, I
coming
like
in.
him because he's a man of shorter stature.
Short in stature, yes. He had to climb the tree to get to see Jesus, so we'll see him. It was interesting. You know, I was just with our RCIA candidates at St. Brendan's, and they were talking about this gospel, and one of the guys pointed out where it said, behold, half of my possessions, Lord, I shall give to the poor. And he said, only half?
It's way more than a tithe.
He goes, doesn't Jesus usually say, give it all to the poor? I said, yes, but Jesus didn't say that. Zacchaeus said that. And he goes, oh, yeah. He goes, I was like, but that's a really good insight. I had never noticed that before. So I was like, good job.
Yeah.
What's your favorite part?
That the Lord wanted to stay at his house.
Yeah.
I think that's how the Lord sees that. He wants to stay in our house. He wants to be in our lives, you know? I think that's fun. How about you, Emily?
Yeah. When I saw the printout and saw that this was the gospel for this Sunday, I was like, the first thing I thought of was how much we talked about this when I was in the second grade, preparing for First Reconciliation. And if I remember correctly, I think, you know, they did like a little mini liturgy of the word before we all went for our first confessions when we made our first confessions. And I very vaguely remember them reading this gospel. It's just a really great story of forgiveness and how the Lord like draws all of us to conversion. And like you said, he stays at Zacchaeus' house, and so then the Lord comes to dwell with us.
Second grade Emily liked it, and Archivist Emily likes it too.
What can I say?
Well, Archivist Emily, thanks for joining us again this week.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me back.
If you had 7 in the pool, you're the winner, and Father Damien wins on the overs, on the under over. So he took the under, I took the over, and so I'm stalling here trying to go to Clough one more time to break even, but it won't happen.
Oh, there it is! Now we can take it home.
I pulled it out.
So there you go, right on the nose with 8 on the Emily Cough, and we'll have that, and hopefully not that. And a whole bunch more next time here on Question of Faith.
And we'll disinfect the microphones.